Chapter 1 in use. Interview with football manager Ted Davis.
Good afternoon, Ted. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Let me start by asking you a few background questions. Is it true that you were first taken on by Winchester United as a dog's body?
Well, that's quite right. As a youngster, I used to go round with the chairman's son, and one day his father offered me the job of cleaning the players' boots. All the guys today give me a lot of stick about it. But I was a cocky lad even then. I knew I had it in me to climb the ladder. I always felt in my element at this club.
Many people are baffled as to why you never made it as a regular first-team player. You are on record as saying that you were occasionally played out of position.
That must be the understatement of the year. I only ever featured as a defender, which really rubbed me up the wrong way, since I was a gifted winger. The problem was, I didn't know how to go about adapting to new positions.
In today's team, you seem to have a lot of young players coming through. How do you encourage them?
I try not to bog them down with technicalities. Some of them are quite touchy when I have a go at them for something. Others need a lot of pushing to get them going. I know it's a cliché, but they will all have to go through a lot of hardship before they get to the top.
Thanks for your time. Good luck for the championship.
Radio News.
Good evening. This is the 6 o'clock news. Today, the outgoing Home Secretary denied reports that the backlog of passport applications has caused millions of holidaymakers to miss their flights. He said, "You cannot go by the scare stories of the press. Everything is under control." However, a spokesman for the Travellers Bureau said, "There's a rumour going about that the Prime Minister has admitted, off the record, that all decisions as to how to solve the problem have been left up in the air. We will, of course, keep all listeners posted." In other news, members of Parliament have been told to brush up on their European languages. There has been a survey conducted in the House of Commons questioning new members on their foreign language abilities. What came through most of all was that only a few of the up-and-coming politicians could get by in a foreign tongue. Some of these were even proficient enough to find loopholes in European legislation written in French. However, the majority of MPs only spoke English and struggled with basic grammar and punctuation, even in their own language. They were urged to pencil in dates for language tuition courses. The Minister for European Affairs warned the House that there was a lot at stake in Europe and that we couldn't afford to be able to converse in only one language.
Chapter 2 in use. Personal note in diary.
Monday the 12th of September. I was called into the boss's office this morning. He gave me a long drawn-out speech, the gist of which was that my work had not been up to scratch. He said that he knew that I had a lot on my plate, but it was better to nip things in the bud now. What it boiled down to was that my promotion was by no stretch of the imagination a foregone conclusion, and that my job was at stake. I can usually shrug off such criticism, but I thought my boss had gone over the top. I don't feel his comments were warranted at all. Maybe I shouldn't let myself get so worried about things, but deep down I know something isn't right. I spent the rest of the day in a sulk. What a wimp. Tuesday the 13th of September. Today the company laid on a huge lunch for some clients. I could see their director was trying to weigh me up by asking me questions like, what if a major stumbling block comes to light? I suppose in a way he was quite down to earth, but I felt outnumbered by serious businessmen, and all I wanted to do was to keep a low profile. I got the distinct impression that in the end they wrote me off as the sort of guy who would jump on the bandwagon rather than get drawn into controversy.
A conversation between two best friends at lunch.
I think I might have fallen out with my sister.
Really? Why?
Well, I wrote off her car last week. We'd already had a row earlier in the day, and then I asked if I could borrow her car to pick up the kids from school. Unfortunately, I crashed into the front wall of her house. It was the final straw.
Oh, surely not. It'll all blow over in time, you'll see. Why don't you come out with us tonight? By staying at home, you could be missing out on a great opportunity to meet new blokes. You only go out once in a blue moon.
Well, as far as meeting a new man is concerned, at 43 I think I've missed the boat. And I must say, as the nights are drawing in, I can't really be bothered to go out. Sorry.
Chapter 3 in use. Magazine article by a parent of teenagers.
If you haven't experienced the joys of bringing up teenagers, take my word for it, it brings out the worst in you. By and large, I would say I'm quite an easygoing person by nature, but a lively, disruptive child can make me feel uneasy. I once read a book about bringing up boys, and I must say I found it most enlightening. It says that the vast majority of kids grow out of their annoying habits and that their periods of awkwardness come in phases. The outlook, apparently, is positive for caring, worried parents. It is clear that what you can teach children early on in life will stand them in good stead for the future. However, you have to be tactful when giving advice to teenagers, and in particular, be careful not to waffle on about the dangers of sex. They would just think you were being prudish. Many times you think your son is not going to budge over a certain issue, but if you play down the matter, he will think you are just being complacent. The thing to do is stick it out. You'll get your own way in the end. I always say I wouldn't put it past my son to leave home and never speak to me again, but he'd soon come back after finding he couldn't make ends meet.
Interview with classical musician.
Is it true you've changed the direction of your music because you felt that you stuck out like a sore thumb in the classical music world?
In part, yes, because I found out that...
Sorry to butt in, but you are on record as saying that the people you were working with were often stuck up, and that you were also getting fed up having to carry around a huge, cumbersome double bass.
Yes, all very true, although a lot of what you say is taken out of context. But apart from that, I felt there were other musicians who had cornered the classical market, and so I was persuaded by my producer to bring out something more down to earth.
If you don't mind me saying, people have said it's bland, and that you have become the laughingstock of the classical world.
That's their opinion. What is definitely true is that I've become more streetwise. You have to bear in mind that most people from my musical background haven't got a clue about what's going on in the world. They turn off the news when anything political comes up. Their lives are far too comfortable. I don't want to be lulled into the same false sense of security. I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying, but I don't want to come over as being pretentious.
Not at all, and thank you. I wish you all the best with your new CD.
Chapter 4 in use. Review of David Jones's book, A Summer Too Late.
It is true that of late, David Jones's work has been considered passé. For some, the prose is too stilted, and he tends to dwell on out-of-date issues. For this reason, I did not particularly relish the prospect of new pompous material. However, his present book, A Summer Too Late, and his last book, Alone, about a man stranded on a Scottish island, are like chalk and cheese. A Summer Too Late is about a distraught teenager whose life goes astray after his parents' divorce. Sometimes it's difficult to get one's head round the plot, and I did occasionally lose track of the story, but in the main it is compelling reading. It seems at times that Jones is trying to get something out of his system. He quite clearly wants to tell us what he thinks of traditional family roles, and there is no doubt that this book will create unrest in the conventional literary world. If you have not particularly enjoyed Jones's work in the past and feel he has got away with some poor literature, it's time to give him the benefit of the doubt. I can only skim the surface of his novel in these few lines, but I think you may be pleasantly surprised. Finally, whatever anyone feels about A Summer Too Late, it is quite clear that, amidst all the controversy the book will undoubtedly create, the writer will soon be raking it in.
A conversation between two policemen.
You know, I'm so glad we got to the bottom of the Smith murder inquiry. Mind you, it was obvious that the culprit was going to get his comeuppance.
Yes, the superintendent was getting quite flustered towards the end, as we only had a handful of clues.
To tell you the truth, I think he's past it. What's really amazing is that we did all the work, but he will reap the rewards. I was truly gobsmacked when he took all the credit for what we had done.
I was too. And have you noticed that he seems to get a kick out of presiding over all the nasty murders? I'm too squeamish myself. I would have passed out if I had found that body. Anyway, let's stop talking about work. Fancy a beer?
Chapter 5 in use. News report from Kosovo.
I'm standing at the border of Serbia and Kosovo, where there has been an upsurge in violence over the last few days. In the aftermath of the Serbian invasion, the Kosovan Albanians have had to survive in makeshift huts. Some of the elder members of the community have been huddled around campfires. It is a pathetic sight. The resistance from the Kosovan soldiers is dwindling, and the ones that remain feel jaded. Off the record, NATO commanders have given a pledge that, if called upon, they will make preemptive strikes on Serbian forces so that they are unable to carry out new frenzied attacks. The UN are also building up forces along the border to help feed the homeless, but both sides are making a mockery of the aid programme. The public back home should be under no illusions. Neither side is going to back down without a fight, and it's going to be ordinary citizens who are left to wallow in perpetual misery.
Conversation between two mothers.
You know, bringing up two boisterous kids is doing my head in.
I know what you mean. My sister, who I must admit is quite adept at coping with her 3 children, has decided to have a 4th.
She must be off her head.
Yes, especially as her eldest boy has turned out to be a yob.
Well, I suppose some people get a buzz out of living a hectic, stressful life.
Her husband does a little bit to help her in the house, but it's down to her to get the kids dressed and off to school.
Well, at least she gets some help. I have to grovel just to get my husband to clear the table.
I'm sure if there was a competition for Mother of the Year, my sister would be shortlisted.
Good for her. I'd come last.
Chapter 6 in use. Interview with the Prime Minister.
Many of the voters who fell for your pre-election hype are now beginning to feel disgruntled, saying that you have been coming out with blatant lies. Have your objectives shifted?
No, not at all. Let me take you through what had been going on over the last 10 years before we took over. The previous government ran down all the public services, which alienated the entire British public. They were also guilty of stringing the people along on many other issues. Now the excitement of having a new government is dying down, so we have to sort out the mess we were left in. It has emerged that things are going to take longer than expected, and this is a bitter pill to swallow for some people. But we will be unveiling new strategies in the coming weeks.
As far as education is concerned, you have been accused of dumbing down the syllabuses and undermining the teacher's authority.
Well, for many years, schools have been underachieving. You know, it's just not on. We expect all our children to have a good basic grounding in the main subjects, but many of our youngsters are straying from the right path when they leave school. I don't want to be branded as a teacher hater, but I would like it to be known that things have to change.
Email from John to his friend Martin.
Hey Martin, where were you on Friday night? We all went for a drink at the Coach and Horses. Your friend Tim, who is not endowed with brains even when he's sober, and grates on me more and more each time I see him, got involved in a skirmish with another guy who he said was pestering his girlfriend. Tim thought this bloke was going to be a pushover, as he was half his size, but the little guy was not unnerved by the prospect of a fight, even though his chances of success were slim. Anyway, as they got stuck in, there was uproar in the pub, and I tried to keep the two of them at bay. In the end, they shook hands and bought each other drinks. It's funny how things turn out. Hope we can get together next week and catch up. All the best, John.
Chapter 7 in use. Speech by Managing Director of XYZ Limited.
Thank you for giving up your time today. I'm sorry to deprive you all of an evening with your families. Up to the end of last year, the company's finances were in turmoil. Nobody envisaged this happening after we had embarked on a new policy of cashing in on the government's decision to devalue the pound. At times, we were really scraping the barrel for new ideas, and it was true that a rift had begun to appear between the directors of the company. After bowing to much pressure, in January we decided to turn over a new leaf by curbing our unnecessary expenses. We needed to head off almost certain bankruptcy as our creditors were whinging about not being paid. Now, I can happily say the company is flourishing again. Business is thriving, especially in Europe, giving us a great opportunity to invest seriously and not just dabble in new and exciting products. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time and effort to save this business.
Conversation between two friends on the train coming home from work.
You know, the amount that Peter drinks beggars belief.
Why? Was he paralytic again on Sunday?
What do you think?
He is just a sucker for punishment. He doesn't know when to stop, poor chap.
On Sunday in the pub, he decided to make a beeline for this pretty Italian girl. I tried to tell him she was already spoken for, but it went straight over his head. It's like banging your head against a brick wall trying to tell him how to behave.
Yes, and I'll tell you something else. If you think you're inviting him to my 40th birthday party, you've got another thing coming.
Well, you brought that Bolshe political activist Jim Smith to mine, so I'm thinking about giving you a taste of your own medicine. No, but seriously, you'll see. There's no need to make a song and dance about it. I'll make sure he's on his best behaviour.
Oh, really? I'm sorry, but I'm very sceptical about that.
OK, I have to get off here. See you tomorrow. Have a nice evening.
Chapter 8 in use. Television debate between politicians.
Good evening. Tonight in our London studio we have Janet Jones from the government and Peter Smith from the opposition. Could we have the first question from the audience, please?
Concerning the plight of the asylum seekers currently requesting refuge in the UK, does the panel think that putting them in detention centres is a viable option, or should they be allowed to mingle with the local community?
Peter Smith?
Well, I think the government's recent policy on asylum leaves a lot to be desired. There are too many people sponging off the state as it is. I know the detention centre idea seems a bit grim, and there are bound to be teething problems, but at present we are being overwhelmed by asylum seekers. Accepting more of them without restriction is quite unthinkable.
I don't suppose you go along with that, Janet Jones?
I most certainly do not. With right-wing ideology like that, I don't hold out much hope for Peter's party winning the next election. They have not come up with a plausible alternative to our liberal approach. However, in hindsight, I must admit we could have dealt with the problem differently. There was too much bureaucracy and too little action. But let's put that behind us now. We must stop the appalling harassment of these poor people by racist thugs and try to create a bond between the different communities which make up our country.
What ludicrous rubbish you are talking. Mind you, the British public are under no illusions about how things can only get much worse with Janet's party in power. Not long to go before the next general election when, ladies and gentlemen, you can put an end to your suffering.
Conversation between two wives about their husbands.
Do you know, Jerry doesn't lift a finger to help in the house. And yet, whenever we go to Anna's place for dinner, all she needs to do is flaunt her big brown eyes at him, and he becomes her slave, offering to wash the dishes. Anything.
Well, that's men for you. They all have the same traits. I know exactly what makes Steve tick. He maintains that his current broodiness has been brought on by Chelsea losing the cup final last week. He says he was gutted, but I know that the fact that he's completely skint after our holiday has meant that he can't afford to go out drinking with his mates. That's what's really getting to him.
But we couldn't do without them. I'd be so chuffed if Jerry decided to do the ironing one day. Perhaps the idea of housework will grow on him.
Yes, Marion, and pigs will fly.
Chapter 9 in use. Two students discussing exams.
I have to say, I really resent having to study for chemistry, even though I'm quite hopeful of getting through the exam.
I must say, these days I have a rather apathetic attitude towards the sciences. In last year's physics exam, I tried to embellish my answers with irrelevant philosophical views on the laws of nature. My arguments must have been flawed because I failed miserably. Any ambitions my dad has of me becoming a scientist like him are doomed, I'm afraid.
Well, this year I'll try to put in a good word for you with Miss Austin, the physics teacher, although she has probably tarred all of us with the same brush.
I don't know if it'll make any difference. I'm finding it harder and harder each year to psych myself up for exams. I'm not sure what career path I want to take either. Everything is looking a bit blurred at the moment.
But not bleak. Whatever brought this sudden outburst on? You seem to have got a bee in your bonnet about exams, but I think you're being too hard on yourself. Your recent poor performance in exams is probably just a blip, don't you think? Overall, you've got everything going for you. Don't let a lack of confidence shatter all your dreams.
Thanks, John. You're a real mate.
An article about alternative medicine.
Last week I was browsing through one of the Sunday newspapers when I noticed an article about a new alternative treatment for staving off viruses. Apparently, rubbing banana peel into one's nose twice a day is supposed to fight off any lingering virus which may be hampering a full recovery after a period of fatigue and malaise. In the last few years, I have been prone to coming down with infections, so my gut reaction was, why not give it a go? Initially, nothing happened. Then, I started to sneeze violently and feel nauseous. I became very upset as yet another alternative therapy proved to be a complete waste of time and money. My wife tried to console me, but I believe there is something untoward about these non-doctors trying to endear themselves to a gullible and vulnerable public, many of whom are desperate to find a cure for their ills. I don't want to get embroiled in legal disputes, but if I were to sue any of these cheats over what they allege to be medicine, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on.